obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at WION.com.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.
Hello and welcome to WION, broadcasting live from the British capital. This hour you're with me, Katie Pilbeam, and here are your headlines. Asian markets flashing red across the board as sentiment remains fragile after the current stress playing out across banks in the US and Europe. Over 2 tons of uranium has gone missing from a site in Libya. This is according to the UN nuclear watchdog to member states. Well, according to news agency Reuters, the IAEA, the inspectors there, found that 10 drums containing natural uranium were not present at the location. The death toll from tropical cyclone Freddy crosses 300, with authorities in Mozambique taking several days to assess the extent of the damage and loss of life. Seoul condemns Pyongyang's latest missile launch, vowing a firm response after North Korea launched an ICBM on Wednesday, just hours before President Yoon was due to leave for Tokyo. Memphis Grizzlies star Ja Morant is suspended for 8 games without pay for flashing a gun in a club. The NBA star says his conduct was detrimental to the league. First to our top story today. The UK Chancellor Jeremy Hunt unveiled the budget before the Parliament this week, where he insisted that the plan will bring people back to their jobs. He also claims that the UK will avoid recession this year. Well, as per the Chancellor, shortage of workers is obstructing the UK's growth, and that's why he wants more people over 50 years old, people with disabilities and parents of young children as well, to get back to work. Well, meanwhile, Office for Budget's Responsibility says Britons are facing their biggest fall in spending in 70 years, adding that household income will drop by 6% this year and next as well, potentially. It also warned that the UK living standards will struggle to recover to pre-pandemic levels until 2027 now. Meanwhile, Britons fear that the help from the government won't be enough.
People haven't got as much money as they used to have. And things like fruit now, used to be a necessity, it's not anymore. It's sort of get to be a luxury. People are cutting back, they're not buying as much. Everything's a fortune, it's scary. It's still too expensive. Some of these poor old people or someone with a big family, what chance they got? Something's got to give. Something has got to give. It can't go on.
Well, UK's Labour Party leader, Sir Keir Starmer, accused the Conservative Party of turning the UK back into the sick man of Europe. He slammed the government for the stagnant economy and wage growth.
After 13 years of his government, our economy needed major surgery. But like millions across our country, this budget leaves us stuck in the waiting room with only a sticking plaster to hand. A country set on a path of managed decline, falling behind our competitors, the sick man of Europe once again. According to the IMF, the worst performing country in the G7 this year. A prediction today confirmed by the OBR, and growth downgraded in years to come.
Well, UK lawmakers, they discussed and criticised individual points of the budget. But anyway, it did not end in the same fate as the mini-budget announced by the former Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, the one which pushed the UK economy into market turmoil and cut short former Prime Minister Liz Truss's stay at number 10. How can we forget that? Well, joining us for more on the budget and what it means for the British population, we've got Dr. Nigel Fletcher joining us here, a political analyst here in the British capital. Nigel, good to see you.
Good morning.
So, what did you make of the budget?
Well, as you were just saying there, I think the comparison is with last autumn's mini budget from Kwasi Kwarteng, and I think by that standard, I think that the lack of any great fireworks in the announcements yesterday will be counted as a success. I think what Jeremy Hunt was setting out to do was not sort of provide a kind of pre-election boost to the Conservative Party. There's still quite a way to go until the general election. And so I think what he was trying to do was to make the best of a fairly bad economic picture and to provide some stability. And I think in that he succeeded. There wasn't any great sort of rabbit out of the hat, any great surprises in the announcements. A lot of it, I think probably more than we've ever seen, was released before he even stood up. We've seen most of it trailed in the newspapers that morning. I think the last sort of remaining announcement that perhaps might have been a surprise on childcare was actually sort of briefed and announced in the morning. So there really were no surprises, which I wonder whether that was perhaps a deliberate attempt to ensure that the markets weren't spooked by anything in the budget statement, as they certainly were in the mini budget in the autumn. So I think that was really the sort of political aim of the budget, was to provide some stability and to avoid any great shock. And I think in that, Jeremy Hunt seems to have succeeded.
Okay, as you say, no real surprises, but arguably that's what the market wanted. They wanted a boring budget, really.
Indeed.
Having read the analysis this morning from the other parties and also from much of the media, a lot of people criticising the budget for saying that it gives more to the rich. What do you think about that?
Yes, I think this is going to be a problem for the Chancellor. He's just been on the radio this morning on the Today programme on the BBC, being given quite a grilling on that point about whether it is the right priority to be giving effectively a tax cut to those who are able to save over £1 million towards their pension. That is something which I think will cause him trouble. His defence of that is that it's aimed at NHS doctors. It's a problem that even the Labour Party had highlighted previously. Wes Streeting, the Shadow Health Secretary, had highlighted this very problem of NHS doctors retiring, taking early retirement because they reached the sort of cap on their pension pot. But it is, frankly, a fairly niche problem. I think this is something when we've got households that are struggling with the cost of living, and we've seen analysis from the Resolution Foundation and others on the effect of the lack of wage growth on household incomes combined with inflation and tax rises. So I think when you're looking at the particular problems that have been highlighted on pensions for those with significant incomes, I think that is a political danger for the Chancellor, that this will be seen as something, as Keir Starmer and Labour have been saying, that is the wrong priority at a time when you've got a cost of living crisis for many ordinary families.
He's just desperate, isn't he, Jeremy Hunt, to get people back into work. That seems to be the overriding motivation here. Nigel, thank you very much indeed. That's Dr. Nigel Fletcher there, political analyst here in London. Well, we're going to stay with Britain for now and talk about the strike situation, because the UK is bracing for another rail strike as RMT members of 14 train operating firms take part in the first wave of 4 24-hour strikes. Well, commuters across England are expected to get affected by, well, most of it really. The latest strikes does not involve the RMT members of the Network Rail, though, which means train services for Wales, Scotland are not going to be affected by this one. Now, earlier, rail members called off a planned strike after talks on pay offers resumed. Across the UK, disruption from the national rail strikes is expected to roll as early as on Friday, with the next strikes planned for March the 30th and April 1st. Well, earlier, thousands of junior doctors this week across England, they staged industrial action. 40% of the medical workforce is asking for a pay rise, a hike of about 35%. According to their union, junior doctors have experienced a reduction in their wages by about 26% since 2008. But according to the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay, the demands are completely unaffordable. Well, in recent months, several workers from various sectors in the UK have staged strikes over pay and conditions. Well, for more, our correspondent Alex Isaac is joining us here in London to tell us more about these expected strikes today. Alex, we're always talking about strikes, aren't we? So let's talk about the one that we're expecting today. How is the disruption? How's it looking on the ground there? And how are passengers going to react, do you think, to another strike?
Well, the RMT, as you say, is striking today. They have the picket lines, and some of the trains are on a reduced schedule, but most of the lines are suspended at the moment. Now, we were thinking that the RMT was actually going to call off this particular strike and the strike on Saturday, because they did have 2 offers put on the table that they went to their members, and there was suggestions that this could finally be resolved. However, from what I'm hearing this morning from the union is that there was too many conditions attached to these offers, and they want an unconditional pay offer that they will consider, and until that comes on the table they won't even look at it, which is interesting for their members, because I've spoken to some of their actual train drivers themselves, and they do want to get back to work. They are a bit fed up of this constant striking and being seen as the bad guys. Also, people since COVID are more likely to be working from home, so actually a lot of the majority of people, this isn't really affecting them on a day-to-day basis. Who it is affecting is those vulnerable, low-paid workers who really do need to get to work, and they have no other way of getting there. So they've been queuing for buses, they've been trying to get car sharing if they can, in any way that they can do. So these are the people that are really being affected, and I think that the rest of the UK are also getting a little bit stressed about this whole situation. Why is this continuing so long? If there is an offer on the table, what is it, and what are those conditions? So far, we do understand that some of the conditions involve longer hours, zero contracts, and working overtime, and those are things that the RMT says that they don't want. But this is the modern times, this is 21st century. It is the case that most jobs do have these conditions attached as well. So a lot of people are saying, well, hang on a minute, I'm not getting paid more and I'm still having to do these conditions but aren't available to go on strike. Of course, we have another strike coming on Saturday, and then we have that other strike that you mentioned in March, which will be start of the Easter holidays, which will put a lot more pressure on people with young families who want to maybe go to see their other family or go on holiday or just to get away. So I think there's a lot of people that are a bit fatigued by this situation. And of course, the juniors doctors strike, we have the teachers strike as well, but there is some slightly potential good news incoming. I have understood today that the RCN, the Royal College of Nursing, is actually speaking to the government, and they are looking to potentially go ahead with a pay rise there, but only a small one, and therefore they may not strike again. But of course, it's all up in the air because it really depends on the unions and the government working together moving forward.
Alex Isaac, thank you so much indeed, reporting from London for us. We will be checking in with you throughout the day for updates. Now, thousands of Israelis are up in arms against government plans to give lawmakers more control of the judicial system. Well, on Wednesday, the President, Isaac Herzog, he unveiled alternative changes to the judiciary. However, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, he rejected the new proposal. The president warned, though, on Wednesday that Israel was at a turning point. Isaac Herzog stressed he had been involved in mediation efforts and speaking with thousands of people for weeks now. He said a civil war is a red line.
Bonds with the United States. מי שחושב שמלחמת אחים של ממש, של חיי אדם, היא גבול שלא נגיע אליו, אין לו מושג. דווקא עכשיו, בשנת ה-75 למדינת ישראל, התהום במרחק נגיעה. אבל אני באמת מאמין בכל ליבי, שאנחנו ניצבים היום גם בפני הזדמנות כבירה, היסטורית. הזדמנות להסדרה חוקתית, מאוזנת, חכמה ומוסכמת של יחסי הרשויות, במדינה היהודית והדמוקרטית שלנו, במדינה האהובה שלנו.
While the Israeli Prime Minister rejected the president's proposal, Netanyahu said the main parts of the president's proposal will only worsen the current situation.
אני יוצא עכשיו לביקור בגרמניה, בו ייפגש עם קנצלר גרמניה. הנושא העיקרי שאני אדון בו זה איראן, וגם נושאים אחרים שחשובים למדינת ישראל. הנושאים הביטחוניים לא לוקחים פסק זמן אפילו לרגע. בעניין מתווה הנשיא, אני חושב שכל ניסיון להגיע להסכמה, להידברות בוודאי, הוא ראוי, ועל כן נציגי הקואליציה.
Well, the Israeli government says the reforms are crucial. The government has been citing an imbalance that has given judges too much power over elected representatives. Well, critics, notably on the right of the argument, have said that Israel's top court judges have exceeded their authority by claiming the right to strike down legislation. The Netanyahu government wants to implement an override clause. Well, the override clause would allow Parliament to overrule some Supreme Court decisions with the support of 61 lawmakers in the 120-member Parliament. Well, Netanyahu's government wants to change the system through which judges are appointed, giving politicians more control. Netanyahu has dismissed the anti-judicial reform protests. The government sees it as a refusal by leftist opponents to accept the results of last November's election. The protesters say, though, the future of Israeli democracy is at stake if the government succeeds in pushing through the plans. Well, apart from weakening the judiciary, protesters say the plans will undermine the rights of minorities and open the door for more corruption. Well, let's get more now from our correspondent, Jodie Cohen, who's joining us live from Tel Aviv. This is a complicated situation. What's going on today with this National Day of Disruption, especially in the context of the Prime Minister rejecting the President's compromise framework?
Right, so we've seen 10 weeks of these protests. They were called days of disruption, then they were called days of resistance. And today's demonstration is being billed as a day of escalating resistance. I'm in Tel Aviv, where we've seen the largest of the protests around the country. And as you can see behind me is very much a peaceful protest. This is actually interesting. This is a group of religious Jews who've come together to sing about peace and for unity. They, in coordination with the police, they're blocking. This is the main thoroughfare in Tel Aviv. And this has been blocked off for the protesters for a couple of hours. Now, all of these protests were planned before Prime Minister Netanyahu rejected President Herzog's proposed compromise framework. And we may see greater numbers turn out today as a result of that rejection. The protests are taking place in 150 locations all over the country, at the airport where I was yesterday, at schools, at junctions, at hospitals, at startups, at the homes of ministers, even outside embassies. For example, the British embassy, where Prime Minister Netanyahu is expected to travel next week. Now, many people are concerned about the judicial reform plans. The opposition say they would harm democracy. The coalition says they would strengthen democracy. There are many people in the middle who believe that while the judiciary is too strong, the proposals would make the government too strong, and they're hoping for a compromise. For the first time, they've come out to protest specifically with that message as well today. So while Prime Minister Netanyahu has said no to this framework, the opposition leaders have expressed cautious approval of the framework as a basis for talks and have criticised the government for so quickly dismissing it.
Jodie Cohen in Tel Aviv, thank you so very much.
Thank you.
Okay, let's talk about some sport now, shall we? So Real Madrid have cruised into the quarterfinals of the UEFA Champions League after thrashing the 2022 finalists Liverpool 6-2 on aggregate. Well, Liverpool boss Jurgen Klopp has admitted his side had a 1% chance of going through. He said that before, and now there is a massive rebuild needed to make this once great team competitive again. Well, Liverpool have blown hot and cold really this season, and a loss to Bournemouth wasn't exactly the best build-up to a game where they had to overturn a 3-goal deficit, and that too at the Santiago Bernabeu. Klopp went for broke by naming 4 forwards in his starting 11, while there was a sense of calm in the Carlo Ancelotti's selection. Liverpool played well in patches, and with Mohamed Salah, Darwin Nunez and Cody Gakpo and Diogo Jota on the pitch. Thibaut Courtois was always going to be busy in the Real goal. Well, Real weren't going to back down in front of their home fans, and Eduardo Camavinga drew a fingertip save from Alisson in the 20th minute with that intervention pushing the ball into the woodwork. Minutes later, Luka Modric let fly from distance and came very close to breaking the deadline in the game. Liverpool struggled with the final pass, and when they did, there was always Courtois standing in their way annoyingly. Well, a defensive howler allowed Federico Valverde through on goal in the 53rd minute, but once again, Alisson saved the day in a 1-on-1 situation. Real kept knocking on the door, and it finally opened in comical circumstances when Vinicius Jr. mishit, followed by a superb piece of game awareness, allowing the supreme poacher Karim Benzema to knock it past Alisson. Well, there could be no arguments about that result, and with it, Liverpool's pursuit of a trophy this season when it came to a sad end. Real are now firmly installed as the favourites to lift a 15th trophy in the summer.
Much better than the first leg, but it was that first leg.
I think that the team has a lot more self-belief because of what happened last year. It was a boost of confidence. We played a knockout stage against a strong team and we did very well over the 2 games. And this may help us to make it to the semi-finals. We will have to play with very good teams and surprising teams. Because as I said before, nobody was expecting to see 3 Italian teams in the quarterfinals.
The Tower of London will explore the history of the crown jewels in a new exhibition to mark the coronation this year. While the Jewel House display, where the priceless collections are kept under armed guards, will look at the origins of some of the most precious objects for the very first time. And the list, it does include the Koh-i-Noor diamonds. Well, the history of the Koh-i-Noor will be explored using a combination of objects and visual projections to explain the stone story as a symbol of conquest with many previous owners. Well, this includes the Mughal emperors, the Shahs of Iran, and the emirs of Afghanistan, and the Sikh Maharajas as well. The Koh-i-Noor was seized by the East India Company after its victory in the Second Anglo-Sikh War of 1849. It was given to Queen Victoria and has remained in the crown jewels ever since. Well, in the latest, the tower has come to acknowledge the bitter dispute that surrounds the diamond. The exhibition will explain how a 10-year-old Maharaja was forced to hand over the Koh-i-Noor following the British conquest of the Punjab. While the new display in the tower's Jewel House marks the first significant change to the collection for a decade. It will open to the public in May here in England. That is weeks after the King and the Queen Consort are crowned in Westminster Abbey. That is all from me today. Thank you so much for watching. Do stay tuned to WION for more international headlines coming up for you shortly. Goodbye.
The stress of our world can take a toll on our physical and emotional health. Here, in New York's Catskill Mountains, lies a luxurious place of healing called WION Wellness Center. The WION Wellness Center provides 500,000 square feet of natural methods to manage diabetes, hypertension, chronic pain, obesity, depression, anxiety, and other conditions. We use the traditions of centuries-old natural science from India, yoga, Ayurveda, acupuncture, and naturopathy in personalized programs that help you take charge of your own health. A minimum 5-day stay is recommended for best results. Book now at yo1.com.
Stay connected with the world through WION. Like the page on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter for new alerts. Instagram for videos and images. And the website for the latest news, views and analysis. WIONews.com. World is one.